right now, your brain is actually lying to you.
Oh, completely lying to you. Constantly.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the desk in front of you or, the phone in your hand right now, you think you're seeing a unified solid object.
Yeah.
But physically, you are just absorbing these scattered photons of light, maybe a temperature reading on your skin, and a vague sensation of resistance.
Right. The actual object you think you see is, well, it's an illusion. It's this cohesive image that your mind furiously assembled in, like, milliseconds.
Which is wild to think about.
Yeah.
And welcome to this deep dive, by the way. Today we were walking right onto the factory floor of your mind.
We constantly treat our minds like a flawless mirror reflecting the world. But it is so much closer to a noisy factory floor. I mean, raw materials go in, they get processed, categorized, synthesized, and eventually packaged into what we confidently call a thought.
Exactly. And that factory is governed by a very strict, uncompromising set of mechanical rules. So our mission today for this deep dive is to trace that incredible journey from raw physical sensation all the way to highly abstract concepts.
Right. And we're pulling from some heavy-hitting foundational texts on formal logic and argumentation today. Specifically, we're looking at works by scholars like Ivlev, Strogovich, and Vinogradov.
Yeah, and we're going to figure out the crucial difference between merely having a thought and engaging in correct thinking. And ultimately, we'll untangle why our brains so easily fall into the trap of confusing a deeply held personal belief with, verified objective knowledge.
Which is something I think everyone deals with. But what stands out immediately in these sources is their foundational premise. They do not treat logic as some theoretical puzzle to solve in a, university philosophy seminar.
Right, no, they treat it as the literal grammar of reality.
Exactly, the grammar of reality. And to understand that grammar, we first have to understand the vocabulary.
So let's look at how the outside world actually gets inside our heads. The texts map this out as a staircase of cognition. And step one is sensation.
Sensation, right.
Yeah.
Which is the absolute most basic level of interaction. It's the direct result of the external material world impacting your physical sense organs.
But it is remarkably limited, right? Like, sensation only captures isolated, individual properties of an object.
Yeah, if you are holding an apple, sensation is just the redness hitting your retina. Or, it's the feeling of smooth skin on your fingertips. It doesn't tell you, hey, this is an apple. It just registers red and smooth.
It's kind of like tasting raw flour, sugar, and eggs. Just isolated ingredients.
That is a great way to put it.
Which brings us to the second step, perception. If sensation is the ingredients, perception is the oven.
Right, and the texts are very careful to note that perception isn't just a mechanical sum of sensations. It's not just flour plus sugar equals cake.
Right, your brain synthesizes those raw inputs into a qualitatively new, unified image. You aren't sensing a collection of traits anymore. You perceive a baked cake or, an apple.
And that synthesis is where the mind begins to actively construct reality.
Yep.
And here's the catch, what happens when you leave the room?
The apple is gone.
Exactly. The physical stimuli have vanished. And that brings us to the third step, which is representation or imagination.
This is basically the retained image in your consciousness, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I can close my eyes right now and picture my childhood desk. I can see the color of the wood and, like, a specific scratch near the corner.
Which is an amazing cognitive ability, obviously. But notice the limitation there. Your mental photograph is still entirely tied to specific individual physical traits.
Right. It's a mental copy of a singular physical thing.
Exactly. It's tied to that specific scratch. And that limitation is exactly what triggers the major leap to the top of the staircase, which is the concept or actual thinking.
Okay, so the text described thinking as mediated and generalized cognition. Let's translate that into plain English, because mediated sounds a bit, academic.
Yeah, it's a bit dense. Mediated simply means we no longer need direct physical contact with an object to understand it. We use other knowledge to bridge the gap.
So we strip away all the unessential individual quirks of a representation.
Exactly. You stop thinking about a specific wooden desk with a scratch on it, and you extract only the essential features that make a desk a desk. You create an abstract category.
There is an incredible insight in the material here about the speed of light that I want to bring up. Because light travels at 300,000 kilometers per second.
Right. Mind-blowing speed.
Yeah. And it is biologically impossible to have a sensory representation of that. You cannot picture that speed in your mind's eye.
You literally can't.
And yet, through mediated cognition, we can perfectly grasp it as a concept. I mean, we can do math with it. We can build lasers based on it.
That's the power of conceptual thinking. It allows you to penetrate the essence of things beyond the physical limits of your eyes or ears. I mean, you cannot see the abstract idea of gravity or, economic inflation.
But through concepts, you can completely master them.
Exactly.
So we have climbed the staircase, we moved from scattered sensations, baked them into perceptions, stored them as representations, and finally distilled them into abstract concepts.
We are officially thinking.
We are thinking. But here's the major pivot. The texts point out that just because you can form a concept doesn't mean you are using it correctly.
Oh, this is so important.
Right. Like, if I have the concept of a bird and a concept of a car, I can think the thought the car flew like a bird. It's a thought, sure, but it isn't objectively true. So what separates just a form of thinking from a correct form of thinking?
That brings us squarely into the domain of formal logic. And formal logic studies the pure architecture of thought. It basically strips away the specific content.
So it doesn't care if you are arguing about astrophysics or tax policy.
Right, exactly. It doesn't care. It replaces the words with symbols like S and P to look strictly at the connections.
It's essentially algebra for sentences.
Precisely. Algebra for sentences. It analyzes structures like all M are P, all S are M, therefore all S are P.
And the texts define correct thinking very narrowly, don't they?
Very narrowly. Correct thinking is defined as thinking that expresses truth in a non-contradictory, coherent, and consistent form. It must rigidly align with the laws of logic to accurately reflect objective reality.
Okay, so if formal logic is the architecture of truth, what are the load-bearing pillars? Like, what keeps the argument from collapsing?
The sources outline 4 fundamental laws.
Let's walk through them because, man, we see people violate these every single day on the internet.
Oh, every day, hourly. So the first pillar is the law of identity. This dictates that a concept must mean the exact same thing throughout a single thought process. A concept must remain identical to itself.
This is the ultimate no moving the goalposts rule.
Exactly.
Like, if 2 politicians are debating freedom, but one defines it as freedom from government interference, and the other defines it as freedom from poverty, they aren't having a logical debate.
Not at all.
They're just making noise at each other because the core concept isn't identical.
Right. The argument completely collapses into equivocation. Now, the second pillar is the law of contradiction. 2 opposing judgments about the same thing at the same time, in the same context, cannot both be true.
So if someone says, I am a completely honest liar, logic just physically rejects that.
Yep. A person cannot possess and lack the exact same trait simultaneously. It breaks the structure.
Makes sense. And that ties into the third one, right?
Yeah, this ties directly into the third pillar, which is the law of excluded middle. Something either is or it isn't. A statement is true or it is false.
Humans notoriously hate this one.
We really do.
We desperately want a fuzzy gray middle ground. We want to say, well, it's sort of true depending on how you look at it.
Sure, and we do love nuance in sociology or art. But in the strict realm of formal logic applied to a specific state, nuance just doesn't exist. A light switch is either mechanically on or it is off.
Right. There is no mystical third option where the circuit is magically both.
Exactly. And the final pillar is the law of sufficient reason. Every single thought or conclusion must be logically justified by other thoughts whose truth has already been proven.
So I can't just confidently declare, the economy is failing because the sky is blue.
No, you definitely cannot.
I have to build on bedrock, turtles all the way down until I hit proven facts. But let me throw a wrench into this architecture for a second.
Okay, throw it.
Let's say I build a perfect logical structure. I follow all 4 laws. S connects to M. M connects to P. Can a perfectly structured argument still be completely wrong?
Absolutely, yes. And the source material actually provides a brilliant historical case study of this involving the philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz.
Oh, right, the Leibniz example. Let's get into that.
So he once formulated this argument, quote, God is revered above all other objects, therefore the idea of God is innate, unquote.
Okay, and the texts point out that this is a classic logical fallacy called affirming the consequent. Let's translate how that fallacy actually works mechanically for everyone listening. That's like me saying, if it is pouring rain outside, my front lawn will be wet. I look out the window, my lawn is wet, therefore it must be pouring rain.
Right, you've completely ignored the fact that your neighbor might have just turned on his sprinklers.
Exactly. I assume the result guaranteed the cause.
That is a flawless breakdown of the structural failure, but On top of the bad architecture, Leibniz's starting premise was factually false. I mean, even in his era, it was an observable fact that not every single human being revered God above all else.
So he built a logically flawed house on a completely fake foundation.
Exactly. Which illustrates the ultimate standard for correct thinking. A form of thinking is only considered correct if it guarantees a true conclusion from true premises.
Garbage in, garbage out. If you feed bad data into a perfectly tuned machine, you still get bad data out.
Yep. And this leads us to why formal logic is classified in the text as a normative science. It doesn't just passively describe how the human brain occasionally fires synapses. It sets the strict rules for how intellectual activity ought to be conducted if you want to avoid allogisms.
Allogisms, which is the term for systematic structural logical errors.
Right.
There's a really profound connection here that grounds all of this abstract theory, because these logical laws, identity, contradiction, excluded, middle limit, they aren't just arbitrary rules invented by guys in powdered wigs, right?
No, not at all. They're actual reflections of the objective physical world.
That's the wild part. The reason we can't contradict ourselves logically is because a physical door cannot be completely open and completely closed at the exact same millisecond.
Exactly. Logic works because it mirrors the material universe. Consciously applying these laws basically becomes your intellectual armor.
I like that, intellectual armor.
Yeah, because unconscious, reflexive thinking might be enough to navigate a grocery store. But structured, logically sound thinking is the framework that allows scientists to build airplanes that don't fall out of the sky.
And it protects you from being manipulated by deceptive marketing or, political rhetoric that relies entirely on structural fallacies to sound convincing.
Oh, absolutely. Which brings us to a massive friction point in modern society.
Yeah, let's get into this because this is where it gets really real. If logic is this objective, if it maps perfectly to the undeniable laws of physical reality, why is the world full of people screaming at each other over subjective beliefs, treating them as if they were indisputable facts?
It's a great question. And the sources draw a very sharp dividing line here regarding how human beings justify what they think they know.
Okay.
So on one side of the line is scientific and logical argumentation. This is bound by the forms of correct thinking we've just laid out. On the other side are non-argumentative factors, specifically things like internal conviction or revelation. And these are the foundations of religious and often philosophical belief.
Let's look at the biological and psychological mechanism behind this, because I think it explains so much of human conflict. When you hold a deep internal conviction, your brain rewards you for it.
Yeah, it floods your system with dopamine. You experience this profound sense of cognitive ease.
Exactly. So to your brain, the intense emotional experience of, I believe this with all my heart, feels biologically identical to, I have mathematically proven this is a fact. The certainty feels exactly the same.
It does. From a phenomenological standpoint, the person experiencing it literally cannot tell the difference. They use the word know when the structure of their thought is actually believe.
But logically, they are operating in two completely different universes.
Completely different. Scientific logical knowledge is strictly bound by empirical criteria. It requires a verifiable subject area. It demands rigorous logical forms. And most importantly, the texts argue it requires validation through what they call social and industrial practice.
Basically, it has to survive contact with reality. It has to work consistently for everyone, regardless of how they personally feel about it.
Exactly. Belief, conversely, relies purely on that subjective internal conviction. It does not require empirical proof or logical consistency. It really only requires the feeling of truth.
Now, it is fascinating to note the specific lens of our source material here, because some of these older texts by Strogovich and Vinogradov were written during the Soviet era.
Right, they were operating under a very strict Marxist, Leninist, materialist philosophy at the time.
Yeah, and they use this exact logical framework to explicitly attack religious belief and superstition, labeling them fundamentally false because they distort objective reality and lack material proof.
Yeah, they apply the laws of formal logic to spiritual concepts and find them structurally invalid.
And just to be super clear to everyone listening, we are simply reporting the text's philosophical stance here. We aren't endorsing any specific ideology.
Right, we're just unpacking the historical sources.
But regardless of where you personally stand on religion or, the political ideology of the Soviet era, the underlying cognitive trap they point out is incredibly valuable for everyday life.
It really is.
Confusing a strong emotional feeling of belief with a structurally sound, objectively verified piece of knowledge is a fundamental failure of correct thinking. You're basically using the wrong tool for the job.
Think about how often we get frustrated in an argument because someone won't accept our facts, right?
Oh, constantly.
When in reality, we are trying to use formal logic to dismantle their internal convictions. You cannot logically disprove an internal feeling.
No, you can't.
And you cannot use an internal feeling to claim an objective fact about the physical world. Mixing those two up is the root of almost all miscommunication.
It's so true. Understanding these forms of thinking empowers you to audit your own mind. You can step back and say, okay, I hold this belief based on my internal conviction and I value it, but I recognize it does not meet the criteria for logically proven knowledge.
And that level of self-awareness is a superpower. It allows you to categorize your thoughts rather than just being ruled by them.
Absolutely. Let's recap this whole journey. We started at the absolute bottom of the staircase with raw sensations, just isolated pixels of reality.
Yep.
Our minds synthesize those into unified perceptions, store them as mental representations, and finally transcend our physical senses by distilling them into abstract concepts.
But having a concept is just the raw material. It is only by applying the strict, unyielding laws of formal logic, the laws of identity, contradiction, excluded middle, and sufficient reason that we actually engage in correct thinking.
Correct thinking is the grammar of reality. It's the mechanism that protects us from the illusion of mistaking our intense internal beliefs for verified knowledge.
But, if we really want to push this to the edge, there's a final paradox to consider here.
Oh, I love a good paradox. Hit me.
Well, we have established that human logic is entirely built on abstracting the physical properties of the objective world. A physical door cannot be simultaneously open and closed. Logic mirrors material reality.
Okay, I see where this is going.
So what happens to our reasoning when we try to apply these strict mathematically physical laws to concepts that have absolutely no physical properties at all?
Oh, wow. Like what?
Concepts like justice or infinity or consciousness itself. If logic is strictly the grammar of physical reality, can that same grammar still govern things that exist entirely outside of it?
That is, does the architecture of truth break down when there is no physical reality to anchor it to? That is a mind-bending question and definitely something for you to chew on today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been great.
Your mind is a constantly running factory, and hopefully today gave you a look at the actual machinery inside. We encourage you to really examine the forms of thinking and maybe spot a few allogisms in your very next conversation. See you next time.